Today, we're diving into something that a lot of people go through, but is, just so deeply misunderstood. We're talking about the really complex and honestly draining dynamics of narcissistic relationships. We're going to break down exactly why these connections can be so damaging, and more importantly, what you can actually do about it.
So let's just jump right in with a question that on the surface sounds completely backward. You've finally done it. You've broken free, you've cut all the ties. So why in the world does your emotional stress actually seem to spike right after you leave? It doesn't make any sense, right? Well, it's a paradox that keeps people trapped, and we're going to get to the bottom of it.
All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First up, we're going to unpack that super confusing spike in stress. Then, we'll look at the hostile environment that people get stuck in. After that, we'll really get to the heart of it all, the anatomy of an energy vampire. And finally, we'll give you a couple of key strategies for taking your power back: gray rock and no contact.
Okay, let's get into Section 1, the spike in stress. This is that really cruel paradox of breaking free, that unexpected moment when you feel worse right after making the one decision that was supposed to make you feel better. It's a tough one.
At the very core of why these relationships just never seem to get better is this one powerful idea: resistance. We're talking about a deep, fundamental unwillingness by one person to take any responsibility for their part in the relationship. And because of that, this constant, unresolved tension just builds, and guess who ends up absorbing it all?
And this quote from our source material just nails it. The relationship is stuck, it's in this unhealthy loop, because one person flat out refuses to take responsibility. It really points to a hard truth. It doesn't matter how much work you do on your end if the other person won't even glance in the mirror.
So when you finally get out, your whole system is just flooded with all that pent-up tension. That's why the spike happens. You can think of it like the storm right before the calm. It's a real thing, it's documented, and it's a totally normal part of healing. All that stress has to go somewhere before things can finally start to level out.
So that resistance we just talked about, it doesn't just disappear. For anyone who can't leave or hasn't left yet, it just sits there and festers, and it creates what you can only really call a hostile environment. It's this constant, draining fight where you just feel like you're running in place and getting nowhere. And this hostility, it isn't just one thing. It's like it's attacking you on all these different fronts. It's emotionally hostile, so you're always on edge. It's spiritually hostile, so it's just draining your very sense of self. And it's psychologically hostile, warping your whole view of reality through constant manipulation. It's a lot.
Now, this next slide introduces a really fascinating idea called energy transference. This isn't something you decide to do, it's totally involuntary. When you share a space with somebody, you're also sharing their energy. And in a hostile environment, that means you're constantly, and without even realizing it, soaking up their negativity. It's a huge piece of why you feel so incredibly drained all the time.
And all of this just creates this deep, profound feeling that you can't win. You might be trying to work on yourself, or build up your friendships, or just make some kind of progress in your life. But because you're still stuck in that hostile environment, it feels like you take one step forward and then you're immediately dragged 2 steps back. It makes progress feel totally impossible.
This constant drain, it leads us to a really important question. What, or maybe who, is the source of all this? And that brings us to Section 3, the anatomy of an energy vampire.
So an energy vampire is, well, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a person who literally feeds off the life force and emotional energy of other people just to sustain themselves. And they are especially drawn to empaths and highly sensitive people because they have so much energy to give. As our source puts it, you haven't been chosen, you've been targeted.
Now, this isn't just about someone having a bad personality. The source material ties this behavior directly to what's known in psychology as Cluster B personality disorders. This group includes things you've probably heard of, like narcissistic personality disorder, psychopathy, and borderline personality disorder. And they're all characterized by really dramatic, emotional, or unpredictable ways of thinking and behaving. And to really put this into perspective, our source brings up a pretty sobering statistic. About 1 in every 25 people is considered a psychopath, meaning someone with no conscience. Now, that doesn't mean they're all villains in movies. A lot of them are just flying under the radar, running companies or living what look like totally normal lives.
So how do they do it? What are their tactics? Well, they're all designed to keep you off balance and totally hooked.
This can be anything from that incredible charm and love bombing, where they just shower you with affection at the start, all the way to threats, super dramatic behavior, and all kinds of other manipulation just to control you and get your energy.
Okay, so understanding the problem is one thing, but what can you actually do about it? That brings us to our last section, a strategic toolkit for taking back control. And we're going to compare two big methods, gray rock and no contact.
This table breaks it down really nicely. The gray rock method, that's for when you have to stay in contact, like if you're co-parenting. The goal is literally to make yourself as boring and uninteresting as a gray rock. So the bully, as the source calls them, gets bored and goes to find their supply somewhere else. No contact, on the other hand, is for when you can completely sever the relationship. The goal there is total removal.
Okay, let's make it even simpler. Think of it like this. Gray rock is a strategy for management, for when contact is unavoidable. No contact is a strategy for elimination, for when you can cut all ties completely. They're two different tools for two very different jobs. Now, this quote from our source material is maybe the most important takeaway of this whole thing. This is not a communication problem that you can fix with therapy. It's not a biochemical issue you can treat with medication. It is, at its absolute core, a character disorder. And the source is blunt. Their moral compass just doesn't exist. And when you truly get that, it changes everything.
So we're going to leave you with this question to really think about. If you accept that you're not dealing with a misunderstanding, but with a fundamental character issue where there's just no moral compass, what does that change about how you deal with the situation? It shifts your focus from how can I fix this to how can I protect myself? And that, right there, might just be the most important shift of all.
Remember that you deserve peace, you deserve clarity, and you deserve to be heard.
No contact can be emotionally stressful. The sense of obligation and responsibility to continue to emotionally invest in an unhealthy relationship can become very strong at times. One thing that is not as noticeable is how the narcissistic or cluster B personality is usually resistant, keyword resistant, to taking responsibility for his or her contribution to the relationship, which is one of the main reasons for the relationship remaining unhealthy and unchanged. What happens when a person is in a state of resistance? He or she can become stagnant, and if they are involved in a relationship with others, those individuals will feel that tension. And right after going no contact, one may think that it will decrease, but no. Right after going no contact, emotional stress tends to spike or increase. Now, I'm not saying this to discourage anyone, just in case you're contemplating going no contact. Another effect of narcissistic abuse is a hostile environment, or the effects of a hostile environment. Case in point, you live with a narcissist. It's going to be a hostile environment. So if a person is choosing to work his or her support base while maintaining the unhealthy relationship or remaining in the hostile environment, absolutely, the emotional stress will increase. And not only that, the person may feel drained. And this is going to repeat over and over because they're still in an unhealthy relationship with the cluster B personality or the narcissist. Therefore, they are in a hostile environment every day. An emotionally hostile environment usually has long-lasting effects on a person. Okay, so let's look at the various types of hostility here. Emotionally hostile, spiritually hostile, psychologically hostile. Because while we're involved with the cluster B personality and or the narcissist, what's going on is that we're sharing space with him or her. Okay? Many times we're sharing space. And when we're sharing space and there's a thing called energy transference that takes place. See, energy transference is something that's involuntary. It happens or occurs naturally between individuals. The energy transference is also what's going to compound or add to the hostile environment on a emotional level spiritual level, and a psychological level. And the energy body will be affected as well. This is often why we feel drained over time. Okay? So when you're in that hostile environment with the person and you are just experiencing all of the abusive tactics from the narcissist or the cluster B personality, yes, you're going to be under a lot of emotional stress. So as you work your support base, it's going to seem like you're not getting anywhere, because actually, in a sense, it's like taking one step forward and taking 2 steps back. It's very important, actually, when you have relationships with others, that there's some resonance. So while living in a hostile environment, you're going to be affected emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically. And your energy body will probably feel drained. Okay? So this is very important to face this, especially when we are working a support base, okay? With all of the shenanigans and all of the abusive tactics that the narcissist is hurling at you on a daily basis, how can you really make progress? How can you really move forward in your life as you attempt to work your support base? It's going to be very, very difficult, adding on to the emotional stress. Confusion on whether or not to apply the gray rock method. This is another effect of narcissistic abuse. The gray rock method is usually more effective when the situation is that you have or have had a romantic relationship with the person and you share custody of your children with him or her. Why? Because you are not in the no contact category. Here's another situation whereas you haven't gone no contact with the narcissist. Say you don't have children. However, you will still accept emails. You still accept phone calls from this so-called ex, okay? Are they really an ex? Well, emotionally, maybe not, because you're still communicating with him or her. You may still see that person every now and then, okay? And let's get real. You might even see that person for a booty call. Let's just, okay? Hey, let's just go ahead and keep it real. You may even still be in contact with that person for sexual means, financial means, emotional means, okay? Whatever the case may be. The bottom line is you haven't gone no contact. So the gray rock method will be effective more than likely if you apply it to that situation. So the gray rock method is for people who have not gone no contact. There isn't any purpose for applying the gray rock method if the relationship has ended or you have chosen to go no contact. One purpose of the gray rock method is an attempt to get the bully to avert his or her attention for source supply and fuel elsewhere. As the relationships continue with the bully or narcissist, the gray rock method will need to be applied repeatedly, mainly because the relationship is not over. See, going no contact means just that, no contact. Now, this is tough for a lot of us, especially when we are still in our feelings, and especially when we are dealing with family members who may have a cluster B personality or a narcissistic personality. It's going to be very tough to let go. And it may even seem to be harsh to go no contact. However, when you begin to really look at the bigger picture and stop idealizing, you're going to see how really going no contact may be your best option.
What is an energy vampire? Energy vampires are people who feed off of the life force of others. They do this by targeting empaths or highly sensitive people. I like to say, you haven't been chosen. you've been targeted, but they're often so charismatic. Oh, he's paying attention to me, he likes me. You know, and I was not the popular kid in 8th grade. And now this person sees that you will be providing them energy, and they just tell you how wonderful you are. They play right into the wounds of the empath and tell you what you've always been longing to hear. Oh, where have you been all my life? You are such a good doctor. Thank God I found you. You're the only one who can help me. And that little part of you goes, oh, I can help. Anyway, energy vampires are often what empaths consider fixer-uppers, but they're really cluster B personality disordered individuals. And that includes sociopaths, antisocial people, psychopaths. That's 1 in 25 people is a real psychopath. Okay, those are people with no conscience. When we hear the term psychopath, we think psychopathic killer. Most are not. They're operating under the radar and they're running major corporations. Then there are the everyday narcissists, narcissistic personality disorder, and then borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder. And the types of behaviors that these energy vampires engage in are overly dramatic or antisocial, binge drinking sometimes, compellingly charming, they threaten self-injury or suicide, or they love bomb you. They do not have a biochemical problem. They have a character disorder. Their moral compass doesn't exist, and that's what you need to know. And they often know exactly what they're doing.